Hey everybody, Nikki the Death Doula, and no, you are not mistaken. You are seeing a full episode up on my feed during my break time. As you may know, I may have mentioned in the past, I am a member of the Feminist Podcast Collective, and we like to support each other when and where we can by doing feed swaps, guesting on each other's shows, giving ads, etc., things like that. So I wanted to air an episode of my dear friend Nicole's podcast, Just Rest. If you are a longtime listener of my show, then you may remember Nicole. She was way back in my first season when I was still a baby podcaster in not November, I think it was October of 2023. I cannot believe it's been 3 years ago. Since that recording, Nicole and I become really good friends. I sadly helped her pack up to move away from me in my city of Columbus to another state. But she gets to come back for visits now and then, and hopefully I'll get to see her again around the holidays this year. But I really just adore Nicole. I love her show. She is a burnout coach and helps encourage people to rest. And she shared this episode with me and thought it might be a good fit for all of you, my listeners, because they definitely do talk a bit about grief and loss in this episode. However, before I dive in, I just want to put out a trigger warning. So the title of this episode was Reproductive Justice and Faith. So as you can probably guess, there will be conversations on reproductive rights and religion. So those are two kind of hot button topics for some people. But if you are into it and you want to listen to this episode, please check it out. If this is not your jam, that is totally okay if you want to skip this one. But don't let that dissuade you from listening to Nicole's podcast. It is really good. I've listened to several episodes. She has such great messages and such great guests and amazing things to share. But we thought this episode in particular would be something interesting for my listeners. So I hope you enjoy it. If you don't want to check out this show, but you want to check out Nicole's podcast, Just Rest, I will put some links in the description, so please go check that out. And without further ado, before I drop this, I just want to say, as always, your grief is yours, your feelings are valid, and grief doesn't always have to suck.
And so when I think of rest and when I think about like the things that I want to do and need to do, I always try to look at it through that lens of like, am I doing this for the sake of it, for, just to perform? And I'm like, no, if it's not enlivening, if it is not building community, it's serving me as created being, then I don't want to do it. And so then it helps me, gives me permission to rest.
Welcome to Just Rest, burnout tips for everyday radicals who are tired but not giving up. I'm your host, Niccole Havelka, bringing you tips and inspiration to help you feel seen and supported on your radical rest journey. Let's go. Hey, Rest Rebels. This is Niccole Havelka, your host of Just Rest, burnout tips for everyday radicals, where we talk to change makers who are making their way in the world, and they may be tired, but they're not giving up. And I have the pleasure of talking to one of those change makers today that I have admired for a really long time, and the work that she and her organization, which we'll get to tell you more about very soon, do in the world. I have with us Elaina Ramsey, and Elaina is the executive director of FaithChoice Ohio. And FaithChoice Ohio elevates the moral power of faith communities for abortion justice and reproductive freedom in Ohio and beyond. And I just love the work that they do. With more than 15 years of campaign, advocacy, grassroots organizing, and editorial experience, she loves listening to people's stories. That makes you perfect for being here with us. I love that too. And engaging communities for social change. Elaina is a former fundamentalist evangelical. We're going to delve into that a little more, who practices compassionate care as a pro-faith, pro-family, and pro-choice Christian. and she currently is pursuing ordination with the United Church of Christ, where I am ordained as well, and proudly serves on the board of Red Letter Christians. Thank you, Elaina, for being here.
Thank you for having me, Nicole.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things that right before we hit record, Elaina and I were both confessing that we are both tired today. So we want to be like, I have already said that we here among this Rest Rebel community, we do not pretend that we have necessarily all of it together, whatever that means. We are showing up as our beautiful and imperfect and, in this case, tired selves. Neither of us had great night's sleep. So if we stumble over our words or things like that, you know that we're just being authentic. That's all that means. And that we're not AI. We are real people who make mistakes and have sleepless nights and have stressed and all of those things. That's why we're here. So the thing I like to do before we get started is take a moment for the two of us and then our listeners who will be listening later to take a deep breath. Just a way to pause and get ourselves in our body and in our space. So I hope you would do that with me, Elaina, if that feels right in your body. So yes. Take a deep breath in. Make it as full as that feels good, and then exhaling, maybe making the exhale just a little bit longer than the inhale. I don't know about you, but I always feel just a little bit better. My nervous system feels a little more calm when I use these great tools that I have at my disposal, like one little deep breath. That's all it takes. And I feel like the feeling of our conversation is different when we've taken even that short moment, that few seconds of rest. How about that?
Yes.
So,
thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Again, I'm so glad to have you, Elaina. So one of the things the thing I usually start or often have started my podcasts with are that I ask people to share a burnout story, but I want to have a little bit of a particular take on that with you because your own personal story of coming to do this work around advocacy and reproductive justice is so fascinating, right? So you write openly about the fact that you were raised an evangelical Christian. And I read somewhere when I was doing a little read up on you yesterday that that even included going to convert Catholics in Rome, which is hardcore.
Oh.
Yes, I'm a former Catholic, by the way. So I love that. So I read that little piece of the story somewhere, and it made me giggle because I'm a former Catholic. Whereas Catholics are on their own high horse because they're like, well, we're the ones who are right, and there's everybody else out there, right? So everybody has a little thread of that. So it's not just you. Anyway, so I'm wondering if you would be comfortable sharing a little bit of that, like conversion story. I think is probably a good way to frame that, like moving from one tradition into something very different. And is there any sort of burnout, sort of pieces to the burnout in that story? I'm just curious, and maybe there's not, and that's okay. But I'm curious how you came to this work and what that journey. That's a big arc. Of your journey. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'd be honored to share. It's really important, I think. It always helps ground me because many people are like, oh, you lead all this stuff. And I always have to remind them and myself that I don't have all the answers, that I had a lot of growing to do, and I'm still growing and still unlearning many things. And so it keeps me humble and grounded in this work. You know, it's easy to put people up on a pedestal, you know, these change makers, these leaders. And it helps me to remember that, yeah, I come from a tradition that said everything's black and white, that you're supposed to have all the answers and tell everyone how to live and act. And if they don't, then they're going to hell. You know, I was really young, I was really naive, and I also found it very appealing, though, that, you know, there was that sense of certitude, and that's really appealing. I think, you know, people always wonder why folks attracted to fundamentalism or, this evangelical way of being. And I think part of it is, we live in such uncertain times, and to have so-called answers is really comforting. And while I had that, there was also a trade-off, right? Like, as an evangelical, you're supposed to be sharing this good news. And here I am, slowly realizing that the news I was sharing was not very, very good. Wasn't very liberating, wasn't very kind. And I, started to question some of these things. And I think a big breaking point for me was my senior year of college. Part of it was just seeing how my community was treating gay folks who were coming out, folks that I worship with side by side. I was like, wait a minute, all of a sudden they're not faithful anymore. And I had to really reckon with that of like, no, the God I know, the God I serve, is more loving and liberated than that. And so in many ways I burned out from it, right? Like I got disillusioned and really started to understand that this tradition I was expecting so much from me wasn't serving me, wasn't serving people that we're trying to so-called reach. Like here I am going on mission trips to convert Catholics and everyone else, telling them to go into hell. Like how is that good news? So yeah, there's definitely some other ruptures and breaking points along that journey that led me to, I was like, okay, I'll move to the South Bronx. I'll become a youth minister. But I still had that in me. I was like, all right, I'm going to go there. I'm going to go save all these poor people and share the gospel with them. And again, I had to confront all the things that were ugly in me. And I had to realize like, oh God, I had internalized so many harmful teachings and messages. And so, yeah, it was through encounter, being in the South Bronx, living with folks, organizing with them. It's where I first learned about the social gospel and understanding that like, all of this stuff about personal salvation, personal works, piety, it's a rat race that nobody is winning. And not unlike, capitalism and the burnout culture and the hustle that comes with that, that was no longer appealing to me. And the things that I came to understand was just like, no, there's a better way. I want to live differently. I want to be different. And all that to say, it just started me on a journey of questioning and led me to seminary and now this work that I do. And so it's been a full, for sure, 180, whatever it is. Yeah, similar parallels with just learning that there is burnout of these communities that no longer serve you. Either you crash and burn, or you have to find another way of being. And thankfully, I found a different community and found a lot of healing and growth for myself.
Yeah. I mean, and I wonder if a part of that feeling of burnout is because of now not being quite values aligned, or, that there's and this may matter to some people more than others, but certainly for folks who, like yourself, that you took your faith very seriously and you wanted to spread this good news, right? With all kinds of good intentions, right? You wanted, I'm sure there's an intention behind that of like, we're making the world a better place this way, right? Misguided though it may have been for you, right? There was a good intention somewhere in there. And then to realize that you're like, no, I actually think that what we're doing is not good. We're actually doing harm in some or many cases. And I think I know that when I'm not aligned in whatever way, right, then I'm going to have like a burnout and maybe even some kind of breakthrough moment, right? That might lead us to a much different and better path. So then how did that
Absolutely.
eventually, how did that lead you then to the reproductive justice movement in particular then? Because that is a real big shift right there. It's one thing, because you could have gone and just been a youth leader in a progressive church, right? You could have done that.
Yeah.
What ended up taking your path into this direction of doing reproductive justice?
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Like,
You're like, how do I sum it up? Right? It's a long
how do
story.
I sum it up? Yeah, it's a lot in terms of just, it's so personal to me that I'm like, all right, I guess people want to know this, but it's important that people see, like, it gives you permission, you can change your mind. And that's what I found. The more that I share my story, the more others are like, oh, okay, it's all right to think differently. And that shift for me started a little bit with, a lot of my queer friends who I was recognizing that, like, oh, these teachings about, especially the things that we were saying that were so judgy and so harmful, were based on our bodies, right? It always had to do with women's purity and about sexuality and saving yourself from marriage and, telling gay people they're going to hell. And I really started to interrogate, like, oh, wow, there's a lot of teachings, but it's all centered on our bodies. And, but who does that benefit? And it wasn't benefiting me as a woman, and my queer and trans friends. And again, it came to a head again during my last semester of college. I was raped by a trusted Christian friend, and that was also a major point where I recognized that I had a lot of blame that I assigned myself, but also wondering, like, but I knew there was something off here, that I was like, this is not okay that I'm blaming myself. And at the same time, is one of the first times where I thought about abortion. And I was like, oh, if this ends in a pregnancy, I knew right away that I would have an abortion. And I knew that was contrary to everything that I was being taught by my evangelical community. And so that for me was a shift of just understanding that these things aren't black and white, and they are more nuanced, and not just in a intellectual way, but again, like, understanding not just the harm I'm doing to others, but the harm I was doing to myself. And I had to do a lot of healing and therapy to get to a place where I wasn't blaming myself for putting myself in that situation and such, that I was recognizing, like, so much of that was rooted in toxic theology and a rape culture that is just, it breeds in these spaces where you're not allowed to question, and where women's bodies are the ones being looked at and controlled. So much of that played into why I began advocating for women and girls, and specifically against gender-based violence. I was doing that in one of the largest progressive evangelical organizations in DC, running their Women Girls campaign. And I was told that I could talk about anything and work on any issue pertaining to women and girls except abortion. And that again was another turning point where I realized, like, I've outgrown this community, that as much as I still consider myself very progressive evangelical, there are limitations, especially when, so they'll progress about everything except abortion and gay rights. And I'm like, no, I don't think this is my community anymore. And that's where I became, United Church of Christ. And I needed to be in a space and do advocacy where all bodies are welcome and all people are welcome, and that we talk about the things that matter to our whole lives, and that includes abortion. for women, like pregnancy is a huge thing we have to contend with, and unwanted pregnancies and unplanned pregnancies. And that touches on abortion. If we're not talking about it, if the church isn't, then we're not. We're doing a disservice to folks. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Long journey and arc there.
It is a long journey. Well, and it's an
yeah.
ongoing journey. We were also talking about how these journeys never end, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're always unpacking and growing and changing as our experiences teach us new things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, this isn't an intellectual enterprise necessarily. It's a process of living life, of being, like you said, when you were young, and then being exposed to different people living in different ways than you had ever experienced before. And then having your own experience of having your autonomy taken away in that horrible way. Teaching, and then you suddenly having this thought about an abortion that you would have never thought of before. And you're like, wait, this is a complicated decision. It's not.
Yeah.
These are complicated decisions, not easy ones. But we can get into that a little bit more. So obviously there's a spiritual and religious grounding to your life. And I'm wondering how that influences your rest practices.
Yeah, it's definitely woven in there, bits and pieces, right?
Yeah.
More in the sense of, oh gosh, what not to do in terms of,
right?
I've been taught in Christianity, Sundays are for rest, and the seventh day, God rested, and I'm like, but where is that happening when we are just, I used to be a pastor's wife, and Sundays were not restful at all. Working in churches, I'm just like, this is how do we practice this thing that is supposed to be core to who we are? And for me, then I have to go back to just reminding myself that I am made in the image of God. And as part of the Imago Dei, like, it's not just God, the big G, but like creator is full of life. We're meant to be human beings, not human doings. And so we're designed to live creatively and in community. And I believe that. And that is what helps me instead of just like, oh, of course you're supposed to have Sabbath. That's what Christianity teaches. But for me, it's a living understanding of who God is. And for me, that's a creative being. And so when I think of rest and when I think about like the things that I want to do and need to do, I always try to look at it through that lens of like, am I doing this for the sake of it, for, just to perform? And I'm like, no, if it's not enlivening, if it is not building community, it's serving me as created being, then I don't want to do it. And so then it helps me, gives me permission to rest. And for me, that's just much more accessible than just saying, oh, honor the Sabbath. No, honor what it means to be made in the image of God and to just be and to be creative. And when I'm not being creative and I'm just, doing my checklist and just grinding it out, that's when I know I'm like, oh, I'm not resting. I don't feel alive.
Yeah. And I love what you were saying about not just like God with the capital G, but this idea of creator or a creating being, moving in and with us, right? And I know that if I'm not well rested, I am not very creative. I don't know about you. Like I can grind out a checklist maybe still, but I'm not doing my most enlightened or excited. I'm not having those aha moments, because if I don't take myself out of the work for a little bit, I usually just start grinding, and that's not great for any of us, right? And it's not going to help the very challenges in the world that we're trying to solve either, right? Creating a space for community care that I know is important to reproductive justice work and to lots of movements, I think. creating that kind of space needs to center rest, I think. And if we're going to go back to the tradition of our faith, the very beginning creation story had God resting on a day. And if you're following that tradition and you're thinking in that way theologically, then that means we're made for rest too. And that plays out. I think that story plays out over and over again in our tradition, in many of the spiritual and religious traditions. I ask this question of almost of everyone who comes on the podcast, and it's people have various faith-based backgrounds, and they all have some root, or there's some root or practice around rest that comes from their tradition, which is so cool, right? That must mean that our ancestors knew what they were talking about, right?
Oh,
Thousands and thousands of years ago, people were talking about this and knew this in their own bodies. Anyway, I'm on a little bit of a soapbox. I'll stop now.
No, I love it. No,
that's what you're inspiring in me. These conversations are so generative to me and inspiring to me. That's what I hope for that. Hope for this space to be like. So this piece of our conversation actually leads really well to something I was listening to. I was listening to your organization's Soul podcast, which I didn't know you had until recently. And then I was like, this has to be on my regular rotation now, because I'm not only a podcast host, I'm an avid listener and have been for years. So I'm like, I should have known this. And you and your colleague, Reverend Terry Williams, who's also a friend and colleague of mine, have a podcast about the role of grief and lament in general, but then also specifically in the work that you do. And I'm wondering if you can speak a bit to that, about how that might be. And I think you actually say it in the podcast, either directly or indirectly, how it's self-care. How is making space for grief and lament a piece of that?
Yeah. This work breaks your heart. I mean, I think not just activists, but anyone who cares about the world, like if you're paying attention, grief is just a part of life. It's really important to my team that we honor our humanity, and we're in a season of grief right now. Started with me. I have other team members, we're experienced a lot of loss. And before that, myself and another team member was diagnosed with cancer. And so just the way that grief is, the way that life moves, just honoring that these, when you think of activist change makers, right? Like, we're human and we struggle with these things, and we pause. We pause our work. We recalibrate. We take a moment to prioritize, and we have to sit back and just give ourselves and others permission to rest and heal and grieve and lament. And yes, it's part of self-care, but it's community care for us. It is the ways that we show up for one another, and instead of expecting you got to get that deadline done, that project completed. No, that's not what matters here. And so life forces it on you sometimes. We've had just cycles in our work. I've been at this for 9 years now, and I can already I look back and I'm just like, there are seasons where we have really had to push hard, and then some that we've taken a step back and we don't regret it, and we need it, and we come out on the other side better for it. And so, yeah, I think a lot about the work that you're doing, and how rest is important, and what does that mean when we're fully human. And for many, it is a luxury where life happens to them. And then, I don't, we took a pause when I was diagnosed with cancer. We scaled back on a lot of things. Was that restful? Not so much,
Right.
in terms of my emotional well-being. And, but did it help us, have better boundaries, all of that? Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I'm wrestling with like, what does rest look like when you're going through chronic pain, you're struggling with depression and grief? Like, yeah, I aspire, let's just say I aspire to be well regulated and be restful. But I also know that I really struggle. I really struggle with that. I struggle with faith, but I think let's be more honest about that in this movement work.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, this is what it means to lead. It's not all just the victories and the wins and like out there in the streets protesting. You look powerful. Yeah. Yes. And it's also sleepless nights and really wrestling with, yeah, are we gonna make it? And also, how do we care for each other and not burn out in the process? Like, it's all those things.
Yeah. And I like that you're bringing in there like your executive director hat a little bit in that conversation, and how you embody that rest or work, in your messy way, right? Which is understandable. Embodying that for and with your whole team, right? And that there are times when, we have to, because of illness in one case, but maybe because we've had heavy seasons of work, we're just going to need to back off and do less for a little bit of time in order to recalibrate. And I think, like you said, that you're better on the other side because of it. Not only personally, I'm sure your bodies and nervous systems and minds are better off for it. And you might be more creative and have more energy for the work. But you're just better, right? And we all need to be better in that way, for sure. So I'm delighted that you're bringing that up, because I'm infinitely curious about how we structure this, or how it happens inside organizations, not only personal rest. Because one of the things that especially in the beginning of the work, when I mostly just had individual clients, and I loved, and I still do, I love working with, say, an individual coaching client who wants to prioritize rest. That's totally fun for me. On the other hand, I know that at the end of the day, I'm sending them back to toxic systems most of the time. These are not other systems. Their jobs or their family lives maybe don't support it.
Yeah, thankfully, like I had to learn. I had to learn from being in nonprofit spaces, which I've always worked for nonprofits, of just like, and churches that expect you to pour yourself into it. Like, that's the mission, right? Of course you're going to make these sacrifices. Of course you're not going to be paid well, and you're going to give it your all, because that's the expectation. And as hard it is to be an executive director, I love that I am able to create policies and practices where we can explore alternative ways of, like, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, we have a sabbatical policy, and that's really important and essential, that I and others get to rest for the time and to honor their labor. And, we have a very, like, just open-ended leave policy. It's just, take what you need. We trust you. Like, there's just, you have to have a culture. You have to develop that. And the policies and practices you put into place will help make that happen, right? Like, do you really honor parental leave and bereavement leave? Like, is it just words on the paper, or are you actually practicing it?
Yeah.
Fortunately, we've had to really practice that, medical leave and bereavement. And those are some ways you practice rest, but it's also the day-to-day, like I have a lot of part-time staff, and we're really big on, like, you do not work. There's always expectations sometimes where, like, you're part-time, but you really work full-time. And it's just like, no, I'm really strict about people's hours. And again, like, we're constantly just looking at stuff like, are we overextending ourselves? What can we not do? What do we say no to? Yeah, it's just, it's allowed all of us to stay in this work a lot longer than, I've burned out in the past. It's the longest work I've done in an organization. I think part of it is, I've been in other systems where, it just wasn't practiced and honored. And there was just a lot of weight and expectation put on folks that is just
Right.
so unfair, especially when you're young. You have a lot of energy. You want to do good. You want to put it into the work, but that often gets exploited. And I think it's my job to really protect the people that I serve with and who serve so that they can serve others well.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I know that I've had both, I either get sort of subtle side eye or have gotten overt pushback when I've had many part-time nonprofit jobs that are definitely the unwritten expectation is that you're going to work more, if not full time. And years ago, I started a practice of logging my time, which still serves me. I still do that as I work for myself now, but I do it as a way to keep myself aware of what I'm spending time on. People look at me like I have 3 heads sometimes when I'm like, no, you pay me for 30 hours. I work 30 hours or whatever the amount of time is.
Yeah.
And that is sometimes it's looked upon like, okay, that's weird at minimum, or at maximum, you're like, well, this isn't how we do things. It can be that aggressive. Like we expect you to flex your time. Well, okay. So what are you actually giving me all that time back? Because I don't think you're actually giving me that time back. Is that really what's happening? I don't think so. It just doesn't work that way. So I'm glad that, like you said, you're figuring that out, that you do have this opportunity and you're in the work that you're doing to actually create policies that are humane and that honor people. And it sounds like if people just need, even if they're not eligible for a sabbatical, let's say, if they needed the time away, you would find a way to give them time away if they needed that time to rest. Yeah,
Absolutely.
And I love that.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, yes, we have an employee handbook for me because I'm the full-time person.
Right.
Everyone else is part-time. They're technically not eligible for bereavement and medical leave. I don't care. We still give it to them. Like, they're grieving, of course.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I'm not going to.
And in this country, give people 2 days or something, 3 days often is what's in a policy, which anybody who's had significant losses know it's not a 3-day operation, right? It's not a 3-day experience. You're lucky to have finished through, a cycle of planning and having a funeral days, much less having any space to really just be and to grieve. It takes a long time. And it never really goes away, like most things. Oh, that's wonderful. That was actually sort of a place I didn't expect we were going to go, but I totally am geeking out for it. I would actually love to talk a little bit specifically about the reproductive justice movement in particular. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I realized there's so much nuance to this movement, which was such a delight to learn. So there's a difference between reproductive health care and reproductive rights. And then I think more what FaithChoice Ohio is aligned with, which is the reproductive justice movement a little more broadly. Can you say a little bit about what the difference between those 3 things are? And then we'll take it from there.
Yeah. I love geeking out about this stuff too.
I'm totally geeking out for it.
When you said about being values aligned, reproductive justice is about values. And so it is really important. I love that you're wanting to know the distinction, because some folks conflate it. And no, there is nuance, and for good reason. So for reproductive health, it is about the health care, that we need for our reproductive lives, perinatal care, contraception, all of that. Yes. What you need when you got to go to your gynecologist, obstetrician. So we got to, preserving that healthcare and that access is really essential. But there's also reproductive rights, like the right to have paid family leave so that you can be with this child you just birthed. So these are the policies, the laws that we implement so that folks can have families if they want them. so it's the rights to abortions as well. Here in Ohio, we passed a ballot initiative a couple of years ago, and it was for reproductive rights and freedom beyond just abortion. Like it covered everything from contraception to sex ed, like the rights to these things, and making sure that, our government is doing right by us. But then justice is, RJ, or reproductive justice, is a lot more holistic. And we really owe a debt of gratitude to the 12 Black women who created this framework in 1994. They were looking at, this big push, to protect Roe in the 90s, and realizing like those conversations about abortion, as important as they weren't actually talking about access. We're talking about, it's not just a right to an abortion, but all the things that come with making that decision. And so they developed a framework in which it includes, RJ is defined by the right to have a family or to birth children, the right to not have children, and the right to raise children in safe and sustainable communities. And so when they're talking about, when there's a singular focus on just abortion, we're not talking about the families who are able to access safe schools. It's one thing to say, we want to provide healthcare and the right for people to have children, but what does it mean when you're then sending your kids off to school and you're worried daily about shootings, or sending your kid off and they're stopped by the police just for wearing a hoodie? Like, that's reproductive justice. And so it is a framework. What I love about it, it is a framework of wholeness. And so when I think about like the values that we have in our organization, it's because of RJ. It's not just this theory, but it is a practice. It's a way of life that says that no one is left behind, that we can build a society where everyone can flourish, and that people can create the families that they want. And that includes, single parent families and families with same sex parents and, families without children, like all of that matters. And so I think RJ has been such a gift to the world and the movement and the work that we do, because it reminds us like how we do the work is this work. And so if we're not practicing our own values that say that, people's lives and their families matter, and we're not practicing, bereavement or medical leave or all these things, then we're not doing RJ. It's not about, because none of us have kids on my team.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that we don't honor, their full lives. And that's what RJ does. And it also, it's so embodied. It centers pleasure and bodily autonomy and agency. And that's enlivening to me. It's not just this list of do this, don't do that. It is, like we're recognizing that people's bodies matter and their agency and their ability to make informed decisions and their pleasure as well. And so, it goes back to being creative beings. And so we get to create the families that we want and that we don't want. And it doesn't have to all look like what, our opposition wants. They want, their whole playbook is about, they want people to have babies, but they only want white babies. And they certainly want them, with only a very heteronormative way of having families that, it's like, are you living in the real world? Do you not see the beauty and diversity of all the ways that people make family, chosen or otherwise? And people who are thriving as single parents or, single individuals, that is also, again, that's where I'm like, that's creative and not just this, black and white version, very white version of what we want the world to look like. And so, anyways, that's RJ in a nutshell of just, yeah, it's the right to have families, not have families, and to raise them in safe, sustainable communities. And so that just, again, is encompasses, like we want families to stay together. So all these attacks on immigrants right now, on trans folks, like that is not allowing families to be together. And so anyways, just a whole host of just justice issues come into play. Yeah, it all matters.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. Again, when I learned that a number of years ago now, but when I learned that about that movement, I was like, that is a beautiful framework. So thank you to the women who created that. I think it's also been deployed in such interesting ways in recent years with the fall of Roe, and then all of these states then moving to either near or outright abortion bans. Then what are those organizations who were, among other things, probably providing abortions do? I know I heard a story, someone telling a story about that I think on NPR recently. It was in the last few months. And I'm forgetting the person's name and where they were exactly, but they talked about, well, we had to shift, like, what do we do? And they leaned into those elements of mutual care.
Yeah.
Or mutual aid for people. Well, okay, we aren't able to provide the abortions we used to, but we can make sure that families have the food and diapers, and that children are in safe places, and that we can make sure that they get to, at least that even if people are maybe having babies they didn't want to have, if that happens, or maybe they did want to have them for that matter, that they're being cared for, and that they leaned into doing more of that work. And not that that's ideal. We want them to be able to provide the abortions, but it's because the repro justice movement has been so much more expansive that they said, okay, there are other places we can go. And one of the things as I was prepping for this that I thought about is that if someone is, say, there's a person who gets pregnant who is, working 3 jobs already, because that's what it takes to pay their rent and feed maybe the children they already have. And then they get pregnant for one reason or another, whether it was wanted or unwanted. And then they're like, wait, but if they feel like I just can't do this because I can't afford it, or I'm too tired, going back to rest, is that really a choice? Mm-hmm. Maybe they would have so there's something, I really feel like this should be the place where people on both sides of that abortion issue should be able to coalesce, that we should be able to agree on caring for people, and that, and caring for families. Can we agree on that? I don't know that we've made any inroads on that, Elaina, but it's been in my head for a really long time. I'm like, can't we just set that fight aside and just take care of people? And that has not happened, I know, because you've been part of that movement part of this for a long time. But anyway, so I'm rambling a little bit now, but I think that's one of the beauties of this, is that it does encompass community care, mutual aid, and just making sure people are cared for, and by that extension, I think rested and cared for. And I think that's what we can hope for. Now, I'm sure we can have a conversation about this forever, because I really want to keep going.
Yes.
But I have some concluding questions for you. What is one simple way that you rest? Doesn't have to be complicated.
No, not complicated at all. I'm doing right now. I'm drinking my tea. I love tea. Mm-hmm. Everything, even the things I love to do, like Zumba and boxing, it can feel like a chore. But tea, to me, I'm just like, oh, I just get to enjoy this thing. It's so simple. It's accessible. It makes me be mindful and slow down. Tea to me is life. And it really does. It teaches me a lot, just to be. And I need more moments of that. And so, I'm obsessed with tea. Drinking tea.
I love that.
finding
Right.
tea. Yeah, yeah.
Well, and there, especially hot tea, there's something about it that slows you down. I think it's because it's hot. You can't drink it super fast, like you can a cold drink, especially cold drinks in the summer or something like that. Like a hot beverage will, like you are right now, wrapping your hands around a mug or something like that. There's something really beautiful and pleasureful. Speaking of pleasure being part of this movement, that there's a pleasure to that too, a simple one, right? And it's restful because it helps you stay present and grounded. I love that. I love that. And so what is some way that you resist? And I know your whole life, right? Let's say it this way, stay aligned with that liberated life that you would like for yourself and for others.
Try, which is hard. I'm an introvert. I lean into community. I think fascism, authoritarianism is fueled by despair and division. It just, there's a tendency to want to isolate yourself and to be guarded. And for me, it is, in many ways, I have to force myself to be in community as an introvert who works from home. But when I do, I love it. I organize a lot with the Progressive Asian Women's Leadership Group. And it helps connect me to my community, my ancestors, reminds me liberation for people who look like me, but that extends to others as well. And then, I try to find the pockets of community where I can, where we can celebrate as well. So I have a dear friend who's going through an adoption for their child, who, they're a queer couple when they have to adopt their child because that's the world that we live in. But you have to adopt them to protect them. Mm-hmm. But it was going to be a really, just go to court and just whatever, make the paperwork happen just to do it, to protect themselves. And I'm like, we got to celebrate that. It's not just going to be this one and done thing. Anyway, so we're always looking for occasions to celebrate minor wins, small wins. Adoption's a big win. But they were
a big win, yes.
Yeah, it is a big win.
It is a big win. That's no small thing.
It isn't, but anyway, just being community together and celebrate each other, that really, really matters. Because you remind yourself what you're fighting for, And I'm like, I'm fighting for their families, and they're fighting for mine.
Right, exactly. And that actually reminds me, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I just had the ability to join you for the Zoom call you had after the 2023 vote was taken to enshrine reproductive rights into the Ohio State Constitution when I was still living in Ohio.
Yeah.
And I was so glad I had time. And the reason I had time and space, because I was recovering from COVID, a whole number of things were off my calendar because I had, and again, as I was kind of taken back to that moment because I was going to talk to you today, and I was thinking about this movement in general. And I was like, what a cool thing that I got to do, and knowing full well, you all were saying, and we all knew it, there's more work to come. It's not like this means, we're never going to have to work on reproductive justice again. We know that.
Yeah.
And I know, and there was and probably still is, I'm a little disconnected from Ohio politics these days, but the resistance to even putting that, to putting the laws in to comply with that new overwhelming decision on the part of voters to enshrine reproductive rights into the state constitution. So the work that kind of work continues, but that holistic work probably will never end, right? That broader sort of the tentacles of the movement. There's always more work to be done in that regard, whether it's, advocating at the State House or something else, right? You don't have to be doing that. There's a whole lot of other work to be doing and educating people in the way that you do. So speaking of that, so you've already heard me say this earlier in the podcast that I like to call folks who are part of this community rest rebels. And so one of the things I invite my guests to do is to speak them or write them a little note, like what would you say if you were going to say to these listeners out there, dear rest rebels?
Oh, geez. Dear rest rebels, be kind to yourself. Yeah. I know that it can feel like you have to lead and show the way for others at all times. But remember that the things that you say to others are the things we should be saying to ourselves. When we give others permission to rest and be and grieve, it is also an invitation for us all to say that to ourselves, and an offering and a gift that we give to ourselves, that we get to rest. We also get to be human, and that you matter just as much as the people that you're trying to change and impact. And yeah, that's what I would say, because that's what I need to say to myself all the time.
Right.
Yes.
Both of us, as we arrived today on this sleepy Tuesday that we're recording this podcast on. So yes, that's a great reminder. Whatever you would say to someone else, try saying it to yourself. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Love that. I love that. And then I always ask my guests, what organization would you lift up who's doing good in the world? And so I like lift up FaithChoice Ohio. Tell us some of the cool things that are going on with you all. Is there any new big initiative that we can support? And as a thank you for your time, I usually give a small donation to any of the organizations that my guests name, and as a thank you. And then also, I'm working. I haven't gotten this done just yet. I promised to do it though. I'm going to put all of these on my podcast website so that people can find them later and know, because I've had such really cool organizations, a number of which I had never even heard of until my guests told me about them. So what a cool thing. So tell us about FaithChoice Ohio. What are you excited about there, and how can we support you?
Gosh, yeah, we're always experimenting at FaithChoice Ohio. We are people of faith who are there to help other people of faith get off the sidelines and put their faith into action for reproductive health, rights, and justice. We do a lot of education. We do some advocacy. Like really right now, we're really important to get a paid family leave on the books here in Ohio. And we do direct service. We really plug in with local communities. We do that mutual aid. And we're thrilled that, a couple of years ago, we opened the Jubilee Fund. And that's where we get folks to do the practical support around abortion access, right? Like, it's not enough to have the right to an abortion, but if you can't access it, then is it really a choice?
Is it really a choice? Right.
And is it really a right? And so I love that we are thinking creatively, and we provide transportation to folks to get to their appointments if they need an abortion. We provide childcare. We do language interpretation for folks, food, lodging, like the whole package.
Yeah.
That, that has been really life-giving for us to do that work. And right now we're having fun. We're experimenting. There's just a lot of things that we love to just try new things. And so we'll be at Pride festivals. We'll do all of our trainings that are available online, but look for cool stuff that we're building. Like last year we launched these mini zines that folks can download and share with their communities, but we're also developing our own like reproductive justice prayer tracks that are coming down the line. We're going to be working on an oracle deck, simulation, like there's just lots of stuff coming that we're really excited to just help people engage in this work and bring it to their community and practice it. Yeah. So
yes. Oh my gosh.
So many ways. Yeah. People can work for abortion access, but it starts with you. It starts with your own education, your own learning, your own growth, and sustaining sustaining that work matters.
Yeah. And I love that you're doing, I have a heart for doing things creatively and maybe a little off the, not what people expect.
Yes.
And I love that so much. So support their ability to be creative, support their ability to rest so that they can be creative. How about that? And reach people in new ways and help others to, again, learn and grow and change in the context of this reproductive justice movement. So yeah, I deeply appreciate the work that you're doing. And that's why I asked you to be here, because I think it's really awesome. So how can listeners find out more about you and FaithChoice Ohio? Then where would they go look for you upon the interwebs or other places?
The internet. Yeah, you can find us online at faithchoiceohio.org. It's where you'll find all of our trainings. We have a podcast, a blog, the zines. Everything is there for you to plug in. You can find us on socials as well. Same handle, FaithChoice Ohio. We're on Facebook and Instagram. And we have a store. We've got a lot going on. So support us in whatever way. We'd really appreciate it.
For sure. And I will drop links to all of those great things and those great places to find in the show notes. So thank you so much, Elaina, for your time and attention and energy. I don't take that for granted, because I know this is a lot, and especially for sharing your story so vulnerably, because and I know you've done it probably 100 times at this point, because it's part of the work is sharing your journey. But I don't take that for granted that you're here taking the time and your energy to share with us yet again. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Rest Rebels, for welcoming Elaina Ramsey. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Remember, rest is not a retreat from the work we do in the world. It is the work. So if you're ready to rest and resist, here's what to do next. If you know someone who's running on empty, please share it with them. Hit subscribe wherever you're listening so you don't miss a single episode. Rate and review us so that other radicals can find us. Consider joining us on Substack at defythetrend.substack.com, where you'll find bonus content, tips for everyday living, community connection, and resources to keep you grounded. Radicals, remember, you are worthy of rest.